welcome back as we continue our discussions about activism then and now. And I'm honored. Everybody knows how I feel about this young lady here, Miss Cynthia Hardy, to talk about our thoughts as journalists who have covered protests within our careers. For those of us who are just joining us for the first time, I'm Fraendy Clervaud with WACH FOX News here in Columbia, South Carolina. And I've been an anchor and reporter for 15 years now. Cynthia Hardy is the face of On Point with Cynthia Hardy radio and TV shows. You can watch her TV show every week on Sundays at 7 a.m. on WACH FOX 57. Cynthia Hardy, good hello to you.
Hey there, Fraendy. I'm so delighted to be able to share this time with you today and really excited about being able to do something in support of Historic Columbia and Jubilee.
You're right about that. You know, Cynthia, we'll get straight to it. You're an award-winning journalist and you've witnessed a lot throughout your career.
I have.
So kind of tell us a little bit about then and now.
I tell you, Fraendy, it's really interesting. Keep in mind, I come from a different kind of backdrop, right? I come from Birmingham, Alabama, and because I come from what is often called the cradle of the civil rights movement, I had a bird's eye view on a number of things. Though I, didn't grow up during the civil rights movement, I was in a position to benefit from all of the hard work and all of the toiling that so many people did. As a reporter in Birmingham at WBRC TV6, I was able to cover the 20th anniversary of the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where the 4 little girls were murdered. And I was also able to cover the trial of Robert Cherry, who was one of the guys who was ultimately convicted and sent to prison in that bombing. I tell you, being from Birmingham affords me a number of opportunities, and one of which is there were civil rights leaders in and out of town all the time. So in my early career at WBRC TV6 in the late 80s and early 90s, it was really nothing to see Jesse Jackson there, to see John Lewis there, to see, Ralph Abernathy there, to see, just so many civil rights leaders, that would come through and also would lend a lot of, they'd be dropping knowledge, I remember several times interviewing Joseph Lowery, who recently passed away, who was the person who succeeded Martin Luther King Jr. as the head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, and eventually served on the state board of SCLC in Alabama. And so just to know that there was just such a sense of pride among people who had sacrificed so that so many of us, I would hear all the time, Fraendy, when I first got on the air in Birmingham, how proud people were of me, because it was during the time that there weren't very many African-American people on air. I was in that first swoop of African-Americans on air in a prominent role.
Wow. And thank you so much for even doing that and being able to cover this. And, Cynthia, when I think about myself as well, covering things recently, for instance, let's go back to Colin Kaepernick, where a lot of people are looking at that and some people are saying that he's not American, he's not a patriot. But when I look at that from the lens of a journalist and the lens of the civil rights, it's no different from what Dr. King did.
No, it's the same, Fraendy.
Exactly. It's like, he's nonviolent, he is just kneeling or he's speaking his mind. But the same way now, honestly, that a lot of people, in a sense, look at Colin Kaepernick as a pariah for the way many people felt about Dr. King.
Golly, Fraendy, that's an interesting analogy, and I think it's right on, it's just spot on. Oftentimes, because a lot of times, many of us don't want to make trouble, and I don't mean Black people, I just mean people, in general. So a tendency is there for people to resist the movement, resist the activism. But here's the thing, when somebody has that fire in their belly and they feel as if they must act because what they see in front of them is just so unjust, it's really hard to contain that. And so I'm really proud of the media outlets around the country who have recognized the time that we're living in right now. I remember back in the day when one of the marches that I covered, it was during the time the country was, you know, just trying to decide if the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr. was going to be a national holiday.
Ah, okay.
Unrest around the country. And so in Forsyth County, Georgia, in Carrollton, Georgia, there was a march, and I went there to cover it with my white photographer. And so it was, and the racial tension was so high. So I'm standing there covering the story, and people, you know, it's like the parade of people protesting. And so there was just so much venom from one side to the other. And it wasn't long before the people who were throwing things at the Black marchers realized I was closer. And so me and my photographer found ourselves under attack.
Wow.
And it was really something, because all of a sudden this crowd just started, you know, just enveloping us, and we had to be pulled out by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And those people were ultimately charged and went to jail. But I mentioned that because during that time, when we went into that city, the everybody in town knew that there was a Black reporter there with a white photographer. See, those feelings are not here today. You know, you don't have that. And so I'm able to see the change as it's happened, even though it may be slow for some people as they're looking at it. To me, there's a sea change that has occurred, Fraendy, just a sea change. And to be able to see you sitting up there on the leading newscast at WACH FOX in the morning as the lead anchor, it gives me pride, because it isn't something that you should take lightly or that I should take lightly either. The fact that I have a platform and a microphone on a consistent basis.
And you know, Cynthia, and I think about that all the time, and I'm sure you can understand what I'm going to say when I say this next statement, is that because we are in certain positions and platforms, I feel the amount of pressure to make sure I never make a mistake or nothing happens. Because, you know, it's like, for some reason, it's almost like an unspoken rule. Once you have someone Black at a key position, if she does something wrong, it's like you're going to mess it up for everybody else.
Yes, a lot of pressure.
But that same pressure isn't given to other races. You know, people can make mistakes and it's fine, but it almost seems as if once you make a mistake, it's as if the whole entire race made a mistake.
You know, Fraendy, because of the history of African-American people in America, you know, and just all of the stereotypes that African-American people have had to overcome. And so the vestiges of those stereotypes, they're still here. And so that's why we find it so difficult sometimes. You're right. You know, it's interesting because if I'm in a situation and my assistant is not African-American, then, and I go with that assistant into, or if that assistant is not a female. So, and I go into a setting with that assistant, depending on the race and gender of that assistant, people will assume that person is in charge and then I'm the assistant. And that has happened to me so many different times before. I'm been out with a photographer who was not African-American. And so the newsmaker will start talking to that photographer as opposed to you, even though you're the news gatherer on the scene.
Exactly. Or even on that standpoint, Cynthia, too, where a lot of people look at me and I would hear things, oh, you're so articulate. Where did you learn how to speak? Or they expect for me to cover sports. And I would,
yes. Do you even like sports? I mean, I'm sure you do.
I'm not well, sports is there, but I'm not the person to watch it like, you know, oh my goodness, go gun ho for it. I'm more of the, you know, hard-hitting news, the murders, the investigation, trying to find for the community. And I always go through that where I'm telling individuals, I don't even know what you're talking about. You know, I don't know anything about sports, and they look at me crazy, and I'm saying, no, I can be the head anchor at a station and not do sports.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting too, because sometimes people don't realize that they have those kinds of biases, and because they don't mean to insult us. I know they don't mean to insult us, right?
Right.
So, you know, but at the same time, you know, it is a compliment when someone says to us that we speak well, but, you know, that's kind of how we get here. because if our responsibility is to articulate the information to the people consistently so that they understand the information, then we've got to be good communicators. And part of that is the oration, part of that is what we say and what we write. We're also good writers. And
Right.
so, for a number of people, it's a stretch for them sometimes to automatically assume that that's the package that we come in, but it is. I look at you, a guy from Canada with Haitian parents,
Yes.
and I'm sure when people, I know you can speak a little French. And
Yeah.
so,
Je parle français.
I know. And I'm sure that, kind of, it takes people off guard, catches them off guard sometimes when they recognize that. And, but rather than being taken aback or being insulted, Fraendy, I love to use it as teaching moments with my friends who are not Black, because first of all, I think it's important that we have friends who are not Black. I think that's very important.
Because we have to learn on both sides of that angle. Just like
Absolutely.
African-Americans want people to understand African-Americans, we have to understand Hispanics, whites, Asians, and all that.
We do. Fraendy, it's so important that we do that, because it's hard for us to be on solid grounds as African-American people and not want someone to see us and think biases or to think stereotypes if we don't make a general effort to make sure that when we're with people who aren't African-American, that we don't have those same stereotypes too. Understand it when a white person says that they don't like it when they hear African-Americans calling average white women Karen. I understand it, because it's just as racist,
Right.
It's just as racist as calling me Keisha. You know what I mean? Just,
right. Yeah, I see
what I'm saying.
Good point. Good analogy.
Mm-hmm. And so we have to be mindful of that, because I think that in many ways, and people say we shouldn't have to be, but we can, in many ways, we're the standard bearer, of the whole conversation about bringing a level of equality to the racial issue. I think that we have to be open enough to not bring biases with us so that other people feel comfortable enough to approach and ask the questions that they don't have answers to. And sometimes people feel like that's hard, or maybe we don't owe that to other people. But if at the end of the day, we want all of us to get along, then I don't mind extending the olive branch. I don't mind helping people to understand me and other people who look like me.
Absolutely. So Cynthia, where do we go from here? There's a lot of protests. There's a lot of back and forth. What happens?
I like seeing what you've been doing lately, Fraendy, the way you cover the marches and stuff. I think where we go is that we listen to people. And that's what about 2 weeks ago, you were going live.
Yes,
and I was watching you, and you were out there and you were marching with them and everything. And so, but your purpose for being there wasn't just to be in the moment. You really wanted to ask questions to people and ask them why they were there, what they were trying to do. And as you hear from the voices of the people that you were talking to, some of them were young, some of them were older, some of them were Hispanic, some were Asian, some were white, some were Black. And so it's important that we bring that whole spectrum of perspective so that the people who watch us and listen to us have all that information to be able to figure out where they fit into those conversations.
You're right about that. Award.
There's so much about us that is just so varied. But I see you answering that question every morning, and I'm watching you. So where do we go from here? We go there where you are, and the things that you are doing every day to bring people together.
Wow. Absolute. Wow. Award-winning journalist, Cynthia Hardy. Cynthia, thank you so much. This is a great conversation. I would keep on going because we understand each other as journalists.
That's right. Fraendy, I just want to thank you very much. Keep doing what you're doing. Shouts out to Renee Chow down there at Historic Columbia for all that she's doing in the communications department. This has been a great experience for me. Thank you, Fraendy.
Absolutely. Thank you.